Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm Trudy Stern. Last week, we began an eye opening conversation with Zineb Ribuoa, Research Fellow at the Hudson Institute Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East, and one of the sharpest voices on global power competition, Israeli Arab relations, and the growing alliance of adversaries working to undermine Western values. The response to part one of our important conversation was overwhelming, and for good reason. Zineb helped us connect the dots between Africa, the Middle East, Ukraine, and the United States, and the broader chessboard of global influence, exposing how actors like Iran, Russia, and China are coordinating across regions to challenge the West. Today, in part two, we continue that critical conversation, but this time with a focus on the response. How has the West reacted to these escalating threats? Has it been effective or dangerously fragmented? And what does all of this mean for Israel, for US leadership, and for the future of the free world? Once again, I'm honored to welcome back Zineb Ribuoa to Nothing But the Truth.
Thank you very much for having me, Trudy. I really enjoyed talking to you and exploring these issues with you.
Oh, well, it is so valuable for our listeners to hear really what's going on from such a seasoned and intelligent insider. So it's great to have you. Let's delve right in. This past Sunday, you wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about the efforts of that. Well, instead of me paraphrasing what it was, why don't you tell us what the article was about? Because I think it's very much on point. I think what we want to talk about today is what is being done by the West to counter these terrible, terrible fronts.
Yeah, sure. So my article was really I co-authored with my colleague Michael Duran, who's an expert on the Iran issues, but also on Israel. He speaks Hebrew, and he had an amazing view of how to see this, and it was a real pleasure to co-author with him. And actually, we thought that it was fascinating that the story of Israel conducting a cyber attack that actually crippled the Iranian regime at the heart of it by cutting right through the financial system, by going after one of Iran's oldest and largest state-owned banks, that is actually very central to their function. I mean, to the function of the financial institutions of the Islamic Republic, Revolutionary Guard, etc. And that Israel was doing this operation that was very, I would say it was a very elegant and clean operation, because through one of the goals was first of all to confuse the Islamic Republic as to where is this coming from. They also went after the crypto wallets, because how the Iranians try to always evade sanctions and find ways to have liquidity to finance their proxies, etc. They developed a parallel financial system that the West cannot really cripple, to continue their operations. And it was very fascinating how Israel did this strike against Nobi tax and the bank SEPA, which I think just reveals how much Israel, first of all, has access to information that is critical for the regime, but also reveals how through cyber operation, Israel was able to first of all avoid having U.S. troops on the ground, etc., like heavy military operations, and that with a simple operation they were able to paralyze the regime. So on multiple levels, I do think that by burning the assets, the Israelis were able to also burn the foundational power I mean, one of it, the financial one that the Islamic Republic has. Because one of the things that Khamenei spent decades doing was to build a parallel financial system, and he thought that it was an impenetrable financial system, that it was so opaque, and he genuinely thought, and a lot of even the Chinese are also interested in these things. They really thought that Iran was protected financial wise, and I think this is just a testament to the Israeli genius in this whole operation. That during the 12 days war, the Israelis were hitting militarily. They were deceiving the Iranians, but they were also crippling them. And I think this is, just to show how great having Israel as an ally for the United States is. That Israel can conduct these operations with zero US involvement, and that this is exactly the type of ally the United States needs to have and to keep.
So the question is, what was these cyber attacks on the financial systems permanent, or was it something that was, implemented and then Israel pulled it off?
Yeah, so actually it was I mean it was permanent because the Israelis they destroyed all of the some of the digital assets. I think it's like 90 billion digital assets. They also destroyed the banking records. And so this really undermines the regime itself, because a lot of these for example, the bank that was hacked, it's a very important bank because the Iranians rely on it for the military and security forces. It processes everything, salaries, pensions, and the hacker group that Israel used, which we talk about in the piece, Predatory Sparrow. Of course, they claimed credit, but they also said how they erased Bank SEPA's banking data. And I think all the financial institutions understand that data is everything. If you don't have records, you basically do not exist. So a lot of the damage is, yes, very much permanent. And it was amazing when we were doing research on this how the Iranians at first they, it was, oh, it's a glitch, we're going to repair it in a few hours, this is a problem, we're going to fix it. But of course they knew how bad it was going to hurt them.
So could they retaliate? Listening to what the Israelis did makes me, as a person who has money in the bank, extremely nervous that once this was done by Israel to the Iranian banking system, that could be done back to us.
Well, there is definitely, some danger in that. But I would say that because of the nature of this operation, and because the Israelis, through hacker groups and others have infiltrated the system of Iran, etc., it's very hard to replicate that, I believe. There are, of course, other ways through which the Iranians, there are all these reports sometimes that they're going to launch a cyber attack on the United States, on Israel, but going to a bank and erasing their records, I think it's something that the Iranians do not have yet the tools or the means to do so, because they would have done it right away. That's the assessment. But of course there is definitely a risk that they might cripple Israeli system, but for now it seems that they're struggling with it.
Well, I'm happy to hear that it's not easily replicatable, because I was going to leave this podcast right now so that I can run to the bank and put everything in my mattresses. So I'm happy to hear that I don't have to do that. But so, Zineb, after laying out the coordinated efforts by Iran, China, Russia, and others that we spoke about in part one, Do you believe that the Western governments, particularly the United States and Europe, fully understand the scope of what they're up against? Are we still responding to these threats as isolated events rather than a unified campaign?
Unfortunately, yes. I do think that there is some sort of awakening that is happening, though, because of the ties between China and Russia, Iran and China, etc. But Europe obviously lacks the resources to do much. They are struggling in their own economies. They're struggling with their own migration issues. They have their own. There's the threat of Russia right next door. There is the threat that is coming from the Sahel, from Africa. And they actively lack the resources. This is why I think the United States was pushing for much more military spending, which they are doing now. However, I think it will take a little bit more time. For the United States, I think that for now it's still a little bit compartmentalized. The way they treat Russia is very different from how they treat China, from how they treat Iran, and it's done in a manner that, for example, the successes of a potential deal with Iran would have been used for a potential deal with Putin. Of course, none of that happened, and this is something that I thought was interesting to tell you. Like I think last week, Trump said to the Ukrainians that they are expanding the delay, they are expanding the time for negotiating with the Russians by 50 days. And then he said to Zelensky, "Is there something you can do to Moscow to hurt Moscow deeply?" And I think this is interesting, right? Because it's a little bit what the Israelis did. The Iranians had a delay of 60 days. On the 61st, they hit Tehran, and it seems that Trump is trying to replicate that. So I do not think that the United States is yet, providing a coordinating response, but is trying to have allies that can replicate what the Israelis have done. And I think this is a big shift in how we're thinking about U.S. foreign policy, but also about U.S. Alliances, at least from the Trump administration side. And I think that was a very telling thing. Lastly, I believe that given the recent developments in the Middle East, etc., things are still very much volatile and disconnected from one another, despite the fact that it's really Iran and China and Russia that do benefit from this. Um, if I can give one last example of Libya, since the Obama years, Libya has always been a catastrophic state failure. But now, because the Europeans are involved in, in some sort of negotiations, the Turks as well, because the United States is absent, US companies are absent, it is China that is signing MOUs to do deals and to do the restructuring of Libya. And this is where it's very dangerous, where it's China that benefits, from reconstruction, and I think more active U.S. involvement would be beneficial in the long run.
So, one actor that we never spoke about is North Korea. Where do they fit into this whole equation?
Well, the North Koreans have always been in the shadows. I would say they do supply munitions to the Russians. They are aligned with China. I mean, China has a strategic sort of alignment with the North Koreans, in the sense that the North Koreans, have as the great Satan, the great enemy is the United States. The North Koreans have also, I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe that it's true that they have had several operations and some sort of they've been given some help to the Iranians because of the reverse engineering. etc., that the Iranians need to do to build their arsenal. But the North Koreans, of course, they they play a very big role. I know that they're involved in Ukraine as well, and in the Middle East. Of course, any type of disruption that the Chinese or the Iranians do is always welcomed by the North Koreans.
Are they actively helping out?
I can't, I don't have the data in my mind, but for the Russians there, yes, they're actively helping out the Russians in Ukraine. I think, even North Koreans are now involved fighting along the Russians.
So very frightening to hear. So it's actually four actors working together.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
In terms of where we get it right. So yes, the 12-day war against Iran was a tremendous right in terms of America, Israel working together and really defeating Iran in such a short time, and I believe such a crushing victory. How do you see that, and do you see that in other fronts and other areas?
Um, I think that it's for now, I think it's very hard. There is one front that I think the United States and Israel can also cooperate. And I think the Israelis have already signaled that they have to, and it's on the Red Sea. The Houthis are blocking the Red Sea. It's a danger to Egypt. It's a danger to Saudi Arabia. It's a danger to all of the Gulf countries. A lot of these countries do rely on the Red Sea for shipments. The Europeans are spending millions every month on insurance, etc. It's hurting everyone. And the Houthis disrupting the Red Sea, I think the Israelis have already signaled, and they already did hit the Houthis several times. The United States did conduct a military operation, but it did not succeed. In fact, there was a ceasefire announced while Trump was visiting the Gulf. And I think that this is a front where the United States and Israel can cooperate further. The Israelis are definitely going to probably in the next months capitalize on the gains they've made on against Iran to counter the Houthis, and I think this will be a very much welcome development because it's good for the whole region and good for the world in general.
Other than the United States and Israel, who else represents the coalition of countries to counter this this anti-West? Uh,
I think the first country that comes to my mind, especially for example in the Middle East, South Caucasus region, is Azerbaijan. I don't know if you saw recently, but the president of Azerbaijan publicly announced that he is supportive of Ukraine, that he is against all forms of colonialism and invasion, etc. He also yesterday openly praised President Trump, and President Trump retweeted his whole speech where President Aliyev of Azerbaijan was saying about how Trump is a great president and etc. And I think that's massive, right? Because Azerbaijan has to deal with the Iranians. The Iranians have tried for several years to infiltrate Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is a secular country. They refuse the type of ideological revolutionary thinking that Iran currently has. They want to be independent from Russia. So they have diversified their partnerships. They're helping Ukraine when it comes to demining. They are cooperating with the Europeans who are in need of new sources of energy, etc. So I think Azerbaijan is a great example as well, given also the cooperation they have with Israel. Sorry.
so most people do not believe Azerbaijan to be a significant, huge partner. When you're talking about China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, And then on the other side of the equation, the United States, which is clearly significant, Israel, which is very strategic and also considered very, very, uh, very effective. And then you have Azerbaijan. Nobody really considers that such a uniquely uh, powerful partner. So, could you just tell us, tell our listeners and myself, what makes Azerbaijan such a strategically great partner?
Yeah, I think it's fair because it's a very obscure region of the world and it doesn't get much highlighted. But I think that of course Azerbaijan does not have the military prowess of Israel, but it has a very important geostrategic positioning that makes it an incredible partner for Israel, an incredible partner for the United States as well. And I think this is where I see it as playing a bigger role in the future. They are kind of leading, a kind of the third way of these countries that are surrounded by the Russians, by the Iranians who collaborate with the North Koreans on missiles, on missile cooperation, etc. And the Chinese are very much looking to that region because it's a very rich region. They need the region for their Belt and Road initiative. And if you can have an ally like Azerbaijan, not aligning but simply pursuing its interest, which align with the United States and Israel, I think it's a big win, and it encourages other countries um, who are in a similar position to do the same. And I think this is where some geography is very helpful. The I think the Israelis have naturally understood that, and their partnership with Azerbaijan is incredible.
For those of our listeners who don't know where it's geographically located, could you just clarify that?
Yeah, it's right on the north of Iran, next to
It
Armenia.
borders Iran,
Yeah,
correct?
it borders Iran and Russia.
So geographically, you could access Russia and Iran from Azerbaijan.
Yes, yes.
So that
Um,
makes it unbelievably strategically positive.
Yes, of course there is also the fact that, it's not they are also on the Caspian Sea, which is important for Azerbaijan's neighbors, Georgia, Armenia, Turkey as well. But yes, precisely because it is on the borders of, I mean, it has as neighbors Russia and Iran. Having a country like that that can balance have strategic balance is while pursuing U.S. While aligning with the United States is a very powerful thing, I believe.
Why hasn't Azerbaijan been invaded by either Russia or Iran? How has it maintained its sovereignty?
It was it. It's a very complicated history of Azerbaijan. Of course, they're of Turkic origin. The history of the Soviet Union because it was also they're still actually grappling with relics and problems from the Soviet Union, especially in regards to Armenia, etc. Iran, of course, I think has a lot of issues with the current Azerbaijani government because it doesn't align. They don't align. They don't see the Iranians definitely want Azerbaijan to be either a subordinate or a partner. I think the current and the modern state of Azerbaijan is more of a state that, of course, has fought for its sovereignty, fought against the Soviet the Soviet way of thinking and of doing things. They're more capitalistic. They're more open to liberal markets and to the market in general. They have just simply a different way of doing things. And I think that having Turkey, as they consider a big brother, was very helpful in that way. I understand the problems that Israel currently has with Turkey, etc. But still, Azerbaijan, it sees Turkey as an important ally, and sees also Israel as an important ally. And I think it's really thanks to their strategic way of thinking and also statesmanship that allows them to be independent from both Russia and Iran. For example, the fact that President Aliyev said good things about President Trump, it's not really a coincidence. I mean, you can see how Putin is struggling in his war against Ukraine. You can see how he's losing on multiple fronts. He no longer has the same appeal or influence he had before. So I think that Azerbaijan saw that and took the opportunity to align more with the United States. So yeah, I think it's really deep in their strategic culture as well.
So we have three people on our side. We have three, not people, but three countries: Azerbaijan, Israel, United States. Do you see any other active countries? How about Saudi Arabia, Turkey? Either
Of
of them?
course. So of course, I think the UAE, Saudi Arabia, all Gulf states are actively working and cooperating with the United States. Turkey as well is very much important for the United States, especially on the Black Sea, because to counter the Russians and to help Ukrainians have some sort of channels. Turkey is also important because it's operating in Libya, Syria, and other regions that are strategic. But that being said, I think that for now the United States and Turkey are mainly in talks and in how to further their cooperation, etc. Because I think at the end of the day, for the Trump administration, having Turkey and Israel be on the same page, at least on stabilizing Syria, is, I think, the goal. It will take a lot. I mean, a lot of Erdogan's really statements were openly anti-Semitic, and I think it's very hard to get back, to a stage where Israel and Turkey collaborate. But that being said, Turkey has a history of being able to deconflict, or they would collaborate with a country actively on certain issues and just leave some issues aside. And I think there is maybe a way forward to that. Of course, Gulf states, and I think this is very key. I didn't mention, of course, Saudi Arabia and UAE and others, because I do think that Trump is trying to at least and first repair the relationship. Because people forget that Saudi Arabia did normalize with Iran through Beijing. And I think this was a failure of the Biden administration because they let it happen and they didn't do much to repair it. So I think that the Trump administration is first trying to repair the relationship, engage more with Saudi Arabia. The Gulf visit was such a great visit by Trump to repair the relationship and get maybe Saudi Arabia at least to collaborate more on Iran, on Iran, but also on other issues. And maybe we never know about a normalization with Israel, although I don't see that coming yet, but I know that this is on the table.
So it seems to me that the Abraham Accords is more than just what we've all thought about. It seems like the Abraham Accords is creating this um, anti, well, not anti, maybe pro-West coalition. So you have all of these Abraham Accord countries that are clearly coalescing together, and the hope is to create more countries that coalesce together, making peace and being a force against Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea. And many people feel that one of the catalysts for the actual day of October 7th was the imminent uh, Abraham Accords deal between Saudi Arabia, that Saudi Arabia was going to be signing on to the Abraham Accords. And many feel that Iran had Hamas strike on that day to actually prevent that from happening. So maybe that is a much bigger piece of the equation of the Abraham Accords to create a coalition that that would be able to be effective against this very, very bad group of countries. Would you see that assessment as correct?
Yes, I would just add one thing is that I don't think that the goal would be to create a coalition, but more to integrate Israel into the region. Israel feels very much isolated from a lot of its neighbor countries until I think it only got better with the Abraham Accords that had, the UAE, Bahrain, later normalized with Morocco and others. And I think that this is the key part. Why? Because Iran is actively working on integrating itself. This is why they normalized with Saudi Arabia, and this is why the Iranians are talking more to the Egyptians. This is why Iran is in Iraq. They're not in Syria anymore, but they for sure still try to maintain channels. They integrated themselves into the Lebanese political structure. So I think that the very first, I think, baby step is to really have Israel have normal channels with these countries. And before building any type of coalition. Because at the end of the day, the Israelis have to understand that also, the more military success they have, despite all of the political backlash, etc., is precisely what makes them very attractive to their neighbors. It's precisely because Israel can defend itself when it feels in danger that it can be a good and reliable partner. And this is what the United States is telling other, I think, Arab states. And I think that this is more than building a coalition, integrating Israel to the region is key.
So that's a very broad overview of the Western response to these attacks. Let's zero right in for a moment on the United States and what's happening here in the United States. And can you tell us your assessment of how well we're doing in terms of these very deeply embedded bad actors in our country?
Well, I think there are definitely challenges. I would say that the Trump administration has a fantastic program on combating anti-Semitism. They are openly stating their support for Jewish students who have been discriminated against, and how there are pro-Hamas supporters running around harassing Jewish students. I think this was a big rupture from what we've seen before. That being said, it's true that I think it's really an ideological battle, and it will take some time. It's true that the Trump administration is mobilizing all the tools, etc. But I think that this is that it's because the Iranians, for example, the way they do it, they would push for disinformation campaigns on the internet, on Telegram channels, on WhatsApp. They would share them widely, make the United States look horrible, etc. And then people in the West would see that and they would feel horrified and that, oh, this is how the United States is. Of course, it's sometimes it's a totally fake thing, and the same for Israelis. And I think that I think fighting the uh, the propaganda will definitely take a while, and I think this will continue as long as Iran and China and Russia are trying to build their bloc against the West. The one thing I always say is that the West can no longer stay on the defensive. It's not good to just sit there and take the attacks. At some point, the especially Europeans who take a lot, who have to deal a lot with Russian propaganda, at some point, sometimes at some point they have to decide, are they going on the offensive or not? Because it's the only way sometimes to win against these propaganda machines. Of course, I think that there are, as I said, ideological issues that are deeply domestic, of two visions of America, of how, do you want America that has, you know, its own identity, and tries for securing its national interest, or do you want an America that is completely submissive to the NGO way of thinking of things, of this UN models and multilateralism that sometimes strives for processes and not for outcomes, and sometimes the outcomes are completely against the U.S. interest. So I think these are two visions that we have to I think see, but also I think that they are the ones that are shaping the ideological battle that is ongoing. And I think Mamdani is really, you know, like a relic of the Obama way of thinking on foreign policy and all of these things. He's a third worldist who think America should sacrifice itself. And that it's too rich. It shouldn't be too rich. It's too wealthy, too powerful, and it has no reason to, as if it doesn't have enemies that are thriving to destroy it. So I think these are, I think I think it's a real ideological battle.
I think that's a much harder battle to fight.
Unfortunately,
We have great weapons. Israel has shown itself to be a tremendous force with regard to their army and the IDF, and actually cyber army. But it seems like this ideological war is so difficult to fight. I don't know that the arsenal of tools to fight it yet are identified here in the United States, and we're doing at all a good job. You're so right with the Mamdani race in New York, the mayoral race. It seems like that will be a huge loss if he wins, and I'm not sure that there are any weapons to actually counter that.
yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answer to this, unfortunately. I think it's I think it has always been the case, quite frankly, in U.S. politics. It's a real American tradition to have some sort of, you know, either socialist, communist, third worldist, you know, all these type of factions trying to take over each other, or, you know, now they have it as a unified enemy, not just Republicans, but really how the United States is. And I think this is yeah, this is a larger question, and I don't have the answer to that yet, unfortunately.
Well, I definitely think that one of the very important tools that we might have is knowledge. And you're showing it, you know, showing all of um, these actions and actors in the with the clarity that you've really given us. I think that's the first tool in our arsenal for all of us to have the knowledge of what's actually going on, that we see it as a very coordinated big picture as opposed to, you know, an isolated mayoral race in New York or isolated campus issues on different college campuses, but to understand and realize that this is a coordinated effort that has been planned and plotted by our enemies, and to always keep that in the forefront of our minds so that when we are engaging with others, we can actually be unemotional and see it for what it is, just an attack on West.
Yeah, exactly. I think, as you say, to see things as they are, it's the real challenge. I don't know if you remember how Obama had this genius idea of making a deal with the Russians and the Iranians on Syria. And of course, he thought that there was some sort of strategic realism in understanding that the Russians would want a little part and that it's possible to collaborate and cooperate with the Iranians. But the result was catastrophic. The Russians went after Syrians, they went after Syrian cities, raided them, destroyed them, provoked an overwhelming migration crisis to the Europeans. The Iranians used that to help Hezbollah expand in Syria and have other groups. It was a total failure and total disaster. Why? Because he simply refused to see things as they are, that the Russians and the Iranians are looking after themselves, and that in the process, they're looking after how to erode US influence. The United States has more to sacrifice in that for Obama, the United States should sacrifice itself for the sake of a quiet and good conversation with the Russians and the Iranians. And of course, yes, as you said, he refused to see things as they are. And there are so many people who still espouse, his same mindset that are still operating today.
I think another very dangerous response to that is isolationism. And that seems to be very problematic. One answer to the issues that we're seeing around the world is America should keep their head down and stick with Americans and in America and not get involved, and that will keep us, safe. Why do we have to jeopardize our interests by getting involved in other wars? And that is such a naive assessment, because we no longer have the that benefit. This is a global situation, and I just don't see that as a good response. What do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, I totally understand the isolationist stance, which is America for Americans and America should only think about America. And I think this is exactly what should be done. I mean, in the Middle East, yes, America should only think about America. And guess what? There is Israel that is also in the process of helping America think about America. And I think that the way they frame the solutions to the premises and to the problems they offer are actually false. There is another way of doing it, which is how Trump is doing it. That it's not good for the United States to have Syria to be under the Russians or the Iranians, and so or to have anywhere else the Iranians operate. It's not good for Iran to get nuclear weapons. It will the Middle East is too important for the United States and for its grand chessboard to let go to the Iranians or to the Russians and the Chinese. So of course, if Israel is doing everything it can to fight against a common enemy, why disrupt all of that if it's actually good for the United States? So I think the isolationists play this. I mean, some of them at least they play this tricky, clever way, and then until you talk about the solution is, oh, we should not do anything, and we should not talk to the Israelis, and we should not talk to allies who are doing the job for us. That makes absolutely no sense. And this is where I totally split, and I think that Trump is offering a new way of doing things, despite all of the rhetoric the isolationists try to do around it.
Well, you have really broken this down in part one and part two in a way that all of us can really understand. You've clarified what's really going on here, and you've shown us that this is a global war, won by very bad actors, Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea, who are seeking to eliminate the West. They're doing it with the guise of being anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, but it is nonetheless anti-West. And we have on the other side of the equation the United States, Israel, Azerbaijan, and hopefully the Abraham Accord countries and other countries that could be helpful. But the war is going on, and it is very troubling and very tricky. And it seems like the hardest front that's being fought is in the United States. And while our arsenals are tremendous in terms of our weaponry, and we're increasing them more, we're really deficient in what it takes to combat the war that's being waged here. And that to me is very troubling. But infusing us with all of this knowledge and the broad overview is definitely one step in helping us to be ambassadors to combat what is going on here and to have the knowledge and the intelligence and the information. So for that, I must thank you, Zineb. I thank you for dedicating your work and yourself to doing that. I think you're the first line of defense in this war in the United States. And I know that you are sharing this perspective on Capitol Hill and with the people that matter most in our country. So I can't thank you enough for what you do and for helping us to understand the scope of the threats that we face, and give us some hope that we're not powerless in responding to them. We need to just develop the right tools to do so.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to discuss these things with you. Thank you very much.
To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us and for hearing from Zineb Ribuoa these very important issues. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. And if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.